it's out from the start of the meeting.
Well, what was that?
Yeah, the live feed has started.
Okay, it's not actually said it on the screen yet, but there you go. Right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Standards Committee. This meeting is open to the public and is being streamed live to YouTube via the Council's website. It is also being recorded for the purpose of the minutes. If for any reason the public can no longer hear or see the meeting over the live stream, we will adjourn until the connection has been re-established. I would like to remind members of meeting etiquette that has been circulated and the procedures that apply for remote attendees. All members should have their microphones muted and cameras turned on. Members are reminded that you must remain on camera throughout the meeting and ensure you are alone in the room. Okay, right. Item 1, apologies for absence. So have we any at the moment? Have we any apologies that have been received? Or is any from the floor?
There's apologies from Councillor Derek Skinner and Councillor Diana Ruff, Chair.
Right, thank you. Right, item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any interest to declare? No? Right. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. Can we approve the minutes of the last meeting as a true and accurate record?
Chair, can I just come in please on this before it's actually agreed? I did put my apologies in for that meeting because I was in hospital that day and obviously I'm not on as an apology.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can the clerk please record that?
Thank you,
Right.
Chair.
So is there a mover?
I'm happy to move, Chair.
That's Councillor Hancock, and a seconder, please.
I'll second.
Right, Pat Ancliffe. Right, thank you very much. Right. So can we have a vote then? All in favour? Right, so that's any against? Any abstentions? So the motion's been carried. Okay. Right. Item 4, joint whistleblowing policy annual report. Can I invite the governance manager to present the report on the joint whistleblowing policy.
Thank you, Chair. This policy is essentially the same document that you approved at this time last year. However, it has been reviewed to ensure that it is fit for purpose. So it's brought forward to you today for your approval, as it would be done on an annual basis, but with no amendments suggested from last year. Furthermore, the monitoring officer, she is obliged to report to you on an annual basis any instances of whistleblowing. And as you see in 2.2, no instances are reported within the last 12 months. So I'm happy to take any queries any members have, Chair.
Any questions from members? No? Okay. Is there a mover for the recommendation as set out in 6.1 of the report? Councillor Hancock. Is there a seconder? Everybody. Right. All in favour? Okay. Nobody against? Right. Any abstentions? No. Well, the motion's been carried. Right. Item 5, independent remuneration panel, if I can say it correctly. Can I invite the governance manager to present the report on the independent remuneration panel?
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, members' allowances for this authority are index linked to staff pay. So on that basis, it's best practice to review the levels of allowances every 4 years, with the last review for this authority taking place within the 2016-17 municipal year. So it's very timely. The report is brought to standards to advise you that convening an IRP is not only timely but also appropriate, and invites members to share thoughts they may have around the types of persons who might be suitable to sit on such a panel, and some suggestions for your consideration are set out at 2.1 in your report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Any questions? You've all been very quiet today. About David's cat, doesn't even come yet. Right. Is there a mover for the recommendations then? Nobody wants to move it. Yes, Kathy. Yeah, I've seen you, Kathy. Right, that's Kathy Rouse. A seconder, please. Pat Ancliffe. So, and a vote. All in favour? Right. Any against? Any abstentions? Right. The motion has been carried. Right. Item 6, the Local Government Association Model Code of Conduct. Can I ask the monitoring officer to present the report on the LGA Model Code of Conduct?
Thank you, Chair. As members are aware, the LGA, the Local Government Association, consulted on a Model Code of Conduct last year. This followed the Committee for Standards in Public Life's report on the ethical framework in local government. It was felt as a result of that work that there needed to be more structure and uniformity in the codes of conduct applied in local government, hence the model. We've now got that final version through, which is what you have before you. In terms of what we found, with some particularly parish councils, we found that they have very simple codes. This can cause us issues in trying to administer complaints, and it also makes it very difficult for members when they haven't got the similar code to comply with. When we have the district's final version, I will be promoting it to parish councils. I will write out to them, inviting them to use the version that the district will be likely to agree. The intention today is to go through the draft, get members' comments, and come back to Standards Committee in April with a final draft. This will then be recommended to the annual meeting for adoption. Following that, there will be training for district councillors. We're looking, actively putting together a mid-term member induction scheme for May, June later in the year. But we'll also be looking at what training we can give to parish councils and parish councillors. We thought it was worth going through this section by section, but we're going to share out the talking. So I'll start, but the others will come in with various sections. It starts with a joint statement, which I think sets the position out very well, but the only thing I would suggest there is that we perhaps add something from the district council's perspective of why the district council thinks it's important as well. So that's one of the drafting possibilities we have. The introduction on page 2 of 17, it's the same pages, is also self-explanatory, but again, I'm inclined to add something from district council's perspective saying what we want it to say about reviews, etc. The definitions are, I think, perfectly obvious. Purpose of the code section makes it clear it's about you as councillors ensuring your own behaviour is acceptable, and it does encourage support, which I would re-emphasise, from me, Deputy Monitoring Officer, Governance and Legal, with any issues you have in relation to the code. It then goes on to have a general principles of council conduct section. I'm sorry, I thought there was a question. It quotes the Nolan principles. Those are in Appendix A. We've always had the Nolan principles in the Code of Conduct, and I would be minded to put them in, not as an appendix, but in the body of the code, probably somewhere in this section here. It then goes on to outline its general principles of council conduct. I don't think anything there is a surprise. The code as a whole does seem to be placing more emphasis on respect and not bullying. As I'm sure you're aware, this is particularly an issue in some parts of the country with parish and town councils. So that's presumably what they're targeting. Application of the code is an area where they're trying to widen its applicability without changing the legislation. The case law at the moment stands that code only applies to councillors when acting as councillors. This is extending it to where you hold yourselves out, where you give the impression that you're acting as a councillor. Now, where we draw the line is going to be very much dependent on circumstances, etc. So we can't give ideas of what that will be, but we will look to put some examples together in the package with the draft code so that we can have a look at that issue. But it is important to note that it's widening it. And I think it's over to Kev.
Thank you, Sarah. Turning then to the specific standards of councillor conduct, and these are the provisions which breach of which could see you subject to a complaint and action being taken. The first of these is respect. Now, this is something that has appeared in existing codes in brief and without much guidance. The new model code provides a clearer explanation of what respect is, and it explains better where the limits lie between political debate and disrespect. And it focuses particularly on when the former becomes personal attacks on individuals or groups. The other thing that's included is some guidance on how to handle disrespectful behaviour towards yourselves as councillors. So that's something that's new. Moving on, the second point is bullying, harassment and discrimination. Again, it significantly expands on all three of these compared to previous codes in the guidance that it gives, and it roots all three of those in the relevant legal background. So it talks about ACAS when it talks about bullying, and then that links into how bullying is a matter of impact and perception rather than the intention of the person that's doing it. And the harassment and discrimination provisions are rooted in the relevant legislation. Interestingly, it also flags up the Equalities Act duties that are placed on the council as an authority and reminds councillors that your conduct could potentially place the council itself at risk for breaching the Equalities Act. I think Nikki's picking up section 3.
Yes, thank you. So in regard to impartiality, members will be familiar with the themes within this section because it very much mirrors how this is defined within your existing member officer protocol. However, it does have additional emphasis in regard to forcibly altering content of advice or reports.
Back to me, I think, for section 4. Just looking at confidentiality and access to information, again, compared to previous codes, it's got clearer guidance for councillors and reflects up-to-date practice under current data protection law. It addresses the requirement not to disclose confidential information except in limited circumstances, including whistleblowing. It also addresses misuse of any information that councillors may obtain as part of their role. And finally, it makes it clear that councillors obstructing public access to information they should have, it would also be a breach. Thank you.
Okay, then we get to section 5, disrepute. It's re-emphasising here that council is judged by the public as to what they do. We all know that the public doesn't necessarily see a bar between your private life and your actions as a councillor. So in some ways, you're not as free as private individuals because of your actions reflect on the council's reputation. But when doing anything as a councillor or giving the impression that you're acting as a councillor, you should consider whether it's the right thing to do, whether it's compliant with the code and other rules, and whether it has any reputational impact. The next section is use of position. This is not at all new, and this just reflects that you act for the community and what you're doing should be on behalf of the public rather than in your own interests. I think it's over to Nikki.
Yeah, so if I can refer you to part 7, which is a section on local authority resources. As with other elements of this code, the contents are mirrored elsewhere within your constitution, and for this matter, it's as described within your members' allowance scheme, albeit with details of what might be considered a resource, and it does give you examples which we don't have currently. In regard to complying with the Code of Conduct at point 8, as you'll be aware, all members and co-optees are asked to sign up to the Code of Conduct when they're appointed. However, this provision within the new model code is more explicit, where it states that you will undertake training as provided on the Code of Conduct by the local authority, and that's already detailed within your Code of Conduct within intimidate any persons involved in the proceedings, and 8.4 to comply with any sanction imposed finding if there is a finding that a breach has been made. In regard to section 9 on interests, your Code of Conduct currently is very detailed in regard to interest. So this section here provides a précis, but then refers to dealing with actions to take in regard to interests into an appendix, which might be a better way of setting it out. And then finally from me, the section on gifts and hospitality, the example given here is rather generic, of course. It would, when it comes back to you as part of a new Code of Conduct, your rules around gifts and hospitality and the levels that you have previously set would be included within there. However, the wording within the model code does provide you with more clarity, but it is in tune with your current arrangements. Thank you.
So, Chair, basically it's anything that members would like us to include or further explain before we come back with a draft to the next meeting.
Right, thank you for that. No doubt there's lots to go through here. I did notice that at 10.2, I understand that didn't it used to be £25 or something, hospitality?
It was at one stage, yes.
Right. So we've had a rise, have we now, to 50?
The current constitution states that it's £25 currently.
Right. Okay. So until it's voted on, then it goes up to 50 then to take the new one.
If members wish, yes.
Right. Right. Any questions then? There must be loads. It's rather a lot to digest all in one go, I must admit.
And Chair, that's partly why we've brought it now with a view to bringing a draft in April, so that if anybody has any thoughts about it when they've taken it in, they can email one of us and ask us, and we'll try and incorporate whatever's necessary in the draft.
Okay. Councillor Hancock, yes.
Thank you, Chair. This might just be me with the way I've historically read contracts, which I know it's not a contract, but it kind of has the same format. But on section 4, I would have thought under 4A we should also have the provision, some of the provisions that we've got under 4B, because if information is given to us in confidence, but we're really required to disclose that legally, then I would have thought that should be there.
Chair, yeah, I see your point, and we'll look at that as part of the drafting, see if we need to include that in that way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Councillor Hancock again.
Sorry, Chair. It's just this is a really minor bit, but I'm thinking from the perspective of parishes here. Under 8.1, which is obviously about the training. Obviously, a lot of parishes have quite a small budget, and is this something that would be available free to them, because it wouldn't necessarily be as affordable to them as it is to us if they were to adopt our standard code?
Chair?
Well, myself, I think it should be the same as our training. It should be free of charge. I don't know what anybody else thinks.
As Chair, as the monitoring officer, I would always try and provide that training one way or another via the monitoring officer, and we don't charge.
Brilliant, thank you.
I must actually declare an interest on this, because I'm Vice President of DALC, who charge for their training, but there you go. Right. Any more interests? Any more questions at the moment? Right. Okay then, is there a mover for the recommendations? Councillor Hancock, and a seconder, is that Cathy Rouse? Right, could we have a vote then? All those in favour? Okay. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, so the motion is carried. Right. So item 7 now, vacating office, code of practice. We will now consider a proposed code of practice for the application of the 6-month rule. Can I remind members that we are in open session and therefore refrain from referring to any individuals or personal and sensitive information. Can I invite the governance manager to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. So it's been identified that this authority doesn't currently have a documented code of practice for managing the processes when a member vacates office, and that can be for many different ways, which are detailed within that code. Although we do have a way of working that has been in place for a while in relation to this matter. The Code of Practice advises of the legislative requirements in regard to this matter and gives context to some of the arrangements in place for the actions the authority will take in instances where a member vacates their office. One thing to add to the report is that in briefing we identified that co-opted members were not included as part of this code, and it was queried on whether the Section 85 rule or the 6-month rule applied to co-opted members, which it does not. So what I have drawn up for members' consideration today are some suggested additions, and with your permission, Chair, I will table those additions to the members and go through them. Are you happy for me to do that, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I will just share my screen. Bear with me one moment just to make sure I get the right screen in front and just adjust my settings here so that we can all see it. So this is the code that you've got in front of you, and there's a suggestion that there's an addition put in at 1.7 where it states that, as I've explained in reference to a co-opted member, Section 85 and Section 86 of the Local Government Act do not apply, and neither does the LGHA. So a co-opted member may vacate office when they choose to do so through resignation, sadly when they die, or where the council removes them by resolution. If I go further down within the code, there is a typographical error you may see in your code in regard to the numbering. I do apologise, that will be amended. It's an additional 2 points at the end of section 2, which I've put 2.8 and 2.9, where a committee or outside body to which the council has appointed a co-opted member wishes to replace its nominee, the matter will be referred to council. Council alone can determine whether to accede to the request, and that this matter would be considered in private session. Of course, it would be in regard to, that would be under Schedule 12A, and that an example for a reason for replacement could be a sustained non-attendance or non-contact. One final addition would be within Section 5, which just notes that, of course, everything else would be the same, but when it comes to issuing a vacancy, that this matter would be dealt with within governance. So in case of a co-opted member, the governance manager would manage the replacement. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Right, any questions? Councillor Hancock.
Sorry, Chair, struggling with the mute option there. I just have actually one concern with it, Nikki, if I could suggest it and possibly suggest an amendment, and that's to 3.1, where we're saying a request for dispensation or extension for dispensation is made in writing to the monitoring officer or her deputy from the member concerned. And I think that should be something that's preferable, but I can think of quite a few instances where it may not be possible for the member themselves to do it, and I think we should open the scope that someone else may be able to do it on their behalf. As I say, I can think of certain medical issues that would prevent someone from perhaps doing it themselves, and I think we need to be mindful of particular circumstances.
Yes, I think I agree with you. You know, there are people who, I don't know if they've had a serious operation and they can't actually do for themselves. They can get somebody to do it for them, but this would have to be somebody who is approved and has got full approval from them. How they would do it quite, I'd throw it open to the governance and see what sort of grounds they could do. Okay, Pat Kerry.
Yes, Chair. There were several things within this that gave me cause for concern. You know, we're said to be a caring council, and this report goes entirely against this. If a member doesn't inform the council 6 weeks before the 6-month period, they can lose their right to be a member, just like that. As a citizen of the council, Recknell Homes would have a discussion about rent arrears prior to eviction. Council tax department would notify arrears before the bailiffs are sent in. As an employer, would be spoken to by the human resources or line manager before dismissal. But as an elected member, it's entirely incumbent on them to make representation and already it might be difficult to make representation in certain circumstances. The scenario doesn't often happen, and when it does, it often is a result of unusual circumstances, grave illness, severe trauma, mental deterioration. You know, there are lots of reasons why it might be difficult. What concerns me most of all, and I can see why they probably do it, is over on 4.4. The governance team do monitor attendance. However, they will not approach a member in regard to the expiry of a 6-month rule. This is not this is members' legal responsibility and shouldered by the local authority. I'm sure somewhere along the line that isn't a very caring attitude. I think they do monitor it. There are lots of reasons. It doesn't happen very often that a member runs out of time, and it's generally under very severe circumstances. And I do think somewhere along the line that they could monitor and give a heads up to the individual member that it's getting close, or give the heads up to a representative of the political parties that we're in, you know, the leader of the Conservatives, leader of the Labour. At this stage, as a member, I think we're not an employee of the council, and we're not just a citizen. We're part and parcel of the whole process, and I do think it's hanging us out to dry. I can see why they probably don't want to do it in case they forgot. It would be their fault and not our fault. But I think somewhere along the line, there should be some help with that. I could quote several circumstances, but you know, I don't want to bring any sort of names into it. I think we all know. But I will have great difficulty as a member not, you know, I would like that to go back for rethought, just somewhere where there could be a prompt towards somebody to help a member who's perhaps in great difficulty or not. It would be sad to get long COVID and be under the put out of in an induced coma for 3 months and wake up to find, because you hadn't written the letter, you don't get dispensation. And, you know, I didn't like it. I just thought somewhere as a caring council, we should have some responsibility, or a way that we could tell the members that or somebody that represents the members that this could happen. I would have great difficulty in taking voting for this as it stands at the moment. Sorry, I've woken up. It's not very often I wake up, but I have today.
Thank you for that, Pat. I must admit, when you're looking at these poor people in hospital with an induced coma with COVID, yes, I agree with everything that you say. There must be some way of letting somebody know, either the leader of a political party or somebody, a representative, a spouse or something like that, that they're running short of time. Let's put it like that. And perhaps I could ask the monitor to come in on this, please.
Thank you. As you know, I'm a lawyer, and the legal position is it's the member's individual responsibility. Whether or not we were to alert members, that would not take away from that responsibility. It would still be the individual member's responsibility. I hear what you say. We have to do the right thing. We will have a look at it for you if that's what you want us to do, but I can't change the responsibility. Ultimately, the responsibility is the individual members. We can, of course, as has been suggested by Councillor Hancock, accept letters, etc., on behalf of the person if they're too ill to do it themselves. That's not an issue. we can do that. But in terms of the responsibility, it is the individual member. And I don't want to sound aggressive or anything, but the reason for this provision is about representation. If you haven't had if somebody hasn't been for 6 months, they may well have good cause, but that's still 6 months for their public, their voters, and their non-voters indeed in their area have not had representation. And that's what it's dealing with rather than with the individual councillor. But I suppose what I'm coming around to saying is we'll look at it, but anything we do will not be in the code, it will be beside the code.
Right. Would you be happy with that, Pat? Councillor Kerry, would you be happy if we have another look at it?
That's what I was asking for. You know, I was suggesting that we refer it back to see if something on those lines on an ad hoc basis could be included.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Sorry, just to come back, the last thing I said, we couldn't have something on the face of the code because the legal position is that it's the member's responsibility. What I was talking about is what we can do in the background.
Right. So there is a way around it in the background. Should we put it like that?
Possibly.
Right.
We will actively look at that.
Well, for myself, I think it does need looking at, and to try and make it, what shall I say, easier for a member, even if they are sort of comatose at the time. Right. Any other questions? No. Right. Can we approve the proposed code of conduct for the district council vacating office? Is there a mover, please?
Chair, is that including my amendment or?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. I'm happy to move with the amended version.
Right. A seconder? Yes, Councillor Ankley. Right. Could we have a vote then? All those in favour? Okay. All against? Any abstentions? Okay. So, do we have a result there? The motion's carried at that. Do I take it, Nicola?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's correct.
Okay. Right. If we can move to item 8, that's the protocol for the audio/video footage at meetings. Could I ask the governance manager to present the proposed code of practice for audio and visual footage of other meetings?
Thank you, Chair. In the same vein as the last report, it's been identified the authority doesn't have a code of practice written down in regard to this, although we have a practice that we do use locally. I'd like to draw your attention in particular to section 3 within the code, where it does set out at 3.1 there's no requirement to hold a back catalogue of the meetings, although we would leave the video footage up on YouTube to increase access to democracy and transparency for decision making. 3.2, a statement where the footage is exempt, it will not be live streamed. 3.3, where the footage displays behaviour that the monitoring officer and the chair of standards in consultation deemed to be offensive to the public anyway, this would be removed and edited and re-uploaded, minus the offensive footage. It would only be editing of sound rather than video where possible. Furthermore, this code of practice has been amended to make sure that it does apply where the we're in a state of the pandemic where we're operating under virtual meetings, but it also goes on to have its applicability when in-person meetings may return to ask members to comply with the requirements of the Constitution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Right, Patricia Coleman. You're muted. I can't hear you. Yes. No, you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Can
loud
you hear
and-
me? Yes. I know the chair at the beginning of the meeting reminded people if they were taking anything exempt, that we should be that councillors should be in, in a room on their own. And I wonder if this sort of advice should actually be contained within this code of practice, written down, in other words, because it is possible that you can have other people actually in the room and them not be on camera, so you can't see them. Just to sort of remind people that they have a responsibility to treat exempt and confidential items, as confidential to everybody, including other members of the household who may be present or nearby. And I did wonder whether that might be something that could be just written down. I know you reminded people at the beginning, Chair, but I don't see it written down. In the case of virtual meetings I'm talking about.
Nikki, could you come in, please, on that?
Thank you. Yes, we have the etiquette which we use for virtual meetings, which is mentioned and referred to within this document at 3.4. And within that etiquette, it does set out quite clear how members should behave when operating in virtual meetings, and it does give advice and guidance to members about being at home in regard to exempt information, and also talks about devices, listening in, recording devices such as an Amazon Echo that can often pick up conversations, to not have those in the room. So that's quite detailed and referred to. Obviously, if members wish for that to be made explicit within this code of practice, of course, that can happen, although it is referred to and it is written down elsewhere.
Is that all right for you, Patricia Coleman?
Oh yes. I just thought it was worth mentioning. That's all. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you. David Hancock, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I agree with 90% of this. I just have huge concerns over 3.3 because I understand perfectly in terms of editing to remove anything which is confidential, which may be disclosed, and I think that's obviously an appropriate thing to do. But I think when we're coming down to what individuals deem as offensive and don't particularly like, is removing an element of democracy. And I mean, to be fair, and whether this is just me, obviously when we're reading these things, it's always open to individual interpretation, isn't it? But we're saying here, political rough and tumble will not be deemed as offensive. I mean, there are certain members who I find quite offensive in terms of what they come out with at times. And then when we go back to the code of conduct, we've actually got in the new code of conduct, there's actually reference in the paragraph under 1.2, which actually says you should not, however, subject individuals, groups of people or organisations to personal attack. So potentially some of the stuff that we are possibly classing as political rough and tumble, where one group or organisation is slating another one, would actually fall foul of the new code of conduct. But we're saying, in somebody's opinion, that may not actually be offensive. So I think we should take that out. I mean, if people are misbehaving, they're misbehaving. And I understand that, I mean, really, as councillors, we're responsible for our own conduct and not bringing the council into disrepute. I don't really think that we should be then removing footage. It's up to the public whether they feel that person is then an appropriate person to continue representing them in the future.
I think this is, if we could have Sarah, yes.
Yeah, I think we all know where this comes from. The issue is on that particular point that if we don't remove some of these things, we run the risk that the whole recording will be taken down, and that's a principal driver. So in terms of what the chair and I would look at, or chair and my deputy would look at, is this something that's likely to bring the recording down if somebody complains? I think that's where we're getting to, and that's the risk.
Would it be, oops, sorry, I'm echoing there. Would it be possible, Sarah, to actually expand on this a little bit and put down predefined criteria and say it ticks this box or it doesn't? So it becomes much less apparently subjective. I think I'd be more comfortable with that if we had hard and fast criteria.
To be honest, that would suit me as well, because the less subjective it is, the better. I entirely agree. We'll have a look at putting some criteria in.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions on that? So as it stands, you're going to have a look at the criteria for next time.
Yes, Chair.
Right, thank you. Right, any more questions? No. Right, is there a mover for the recommendations, including the bits that need further investigation? No one wants to move it. Yeah, David will. Okay, so it's Councillor Hancock to move it, and a seconder, Pat Ancliffe. Right, could I have the vote, please? All those in favour? All against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that motion's been carried. Let's see now. Right. Item 9, review of the Constitution, Part 4. Can I ask the Monitoring Officer to present the report on the review of the Council's Constitution, Part 4?
Chair, am I doing this or are you doing this, Nikki?
I'm happy to take it, Sarah.
Thank you.
So this is part 4 of your review of the Constitution. As you know, this report of some kind comes to each meeting of the Standards Committee in this, the 4th one of the municipal year. At Part 3, it sets out in the first section of the table, the shaded elements are areas of the Constitution you've already considered through the Standards Committee. The second set is the unshaded boxes, is what's going to come forward for discussion at this meeting. And then the last section of shaded areas are those that will be forthcoming either at your April meeting or into the new municipal year. Also, we do make note at 1.4 of those areas of the Constitution that went directly to Council. We put this in the report just for completeness and just for you to note. But really, I'd like to take members straight into the appendix, which is the bulk of the information of which you'd probably wish to consider and discuss today. There are a few areas of the Constitution that are brought forward for you to look at. The first being a change to the contract procurement rules with a suggestion to raise a request for quotation can be used in place of tenders. This is currently at £50,000 and it's suggested by the procurement team to increase this to £75,000. They're suggesting this change in order to help local businesses, and this is particularly important because of the pandemic's effect on the local economy. Chair, are you happy for me to go through all the changes, or would you like to discuss each change as we present?
If you go through each of it, please.
Thank you, Chair. In which case, I'll move on then to extraordinary council meetings. This is just an error of clarity, so this doesn't necessarily need voting on. This is just for members to note that the monitoring officer, as part of her housekeeping of the Constitution, will add a footnote into 3.3 to add some additional clarity in regard to how extraordinary council meetings are called. The third item is in regard to delegations to environmental health officers. There's a delegation that already exists that is given to the head of planning and the planning manager in regard to Service Section 215 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 notices. And it's proposed that that delegation is extended to the environmental health officers, who usually are the instigators for the action that we're talking about there. The next change is in regard to a matter that we've already considered on today's agenda, which is that code of practice for vacating office. So this is a suggestion to add a delegation to the monitoring officer to provide a dispensation in instances where an application for dispensation is received, but we're not able to hold a council meeting in time for that. I think this was an issue which Councillor Kerry raised during the consideration of that matter, that actually there may be instances where a member is not able to let the authority know that they require dispensation, and this delegation to the monitoring officer would allow the monitoring officer to make a dispensation for a short period of time in which to allow council to consider that dispensation. The next one, second to last, is the review of the CJCC, and there are some minor amendments suggested which are set out in Appendix 2, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any queries if you have on those. They've been considered by the committee themselves prior to coming to you today. And the final proposal for change is that when we take the review of the Constitution report to council each year, we add an extra delegation within the report that the monitoring officer can make any changes to the Constitution if there's any new legislation that comes up in year, if there's any administrative errors or corrections in interpretation. And it's proposed that we just add this to the delegation scheme to save members having to vote on the same issue year on year. Happy to take any questions where I can, Chair.
Right, are there any questions? Councillor Hancock.
Sorry, Chair, struggling with the mute again. I agree with 99% of this, and I just really, it's a clarification, because you know when you can see something going massively wrong and blowing up in people's faces, and I just want to stop that. The bit about the Section 85 bit, I'm assuming that it's going to be so that the monitoring officer isn't put in a position that would create all sorts of potential problems for her down the line, that should that position arise, it would be an automatic dispensation until the next meeting, so that obviously nobody came pointing fingers and saying, well, Sarah didn't do this, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, if I might, Chair, Councillor Hancock, you're entirely right. It would be no decision, you just automatically do it. Yeah.
Any more questions? No? Okay, well, can we support the submission of the proposals to the council as part of the Constitution review? Could we have a mover, please? Councillor Hancock, and the seconder? Councillor Antcliffe. Could we have a show of hands here? All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Right, so the motion's been carried. Right. Could we have item 10, the complaint update? Can I invite the monitoring officer to update the committee on complaints?
Thank you, Chair. After a bit of a rough passage, and with Kev coming in as Deputy Monitoring Officer, we've managed to get through quite a lot of these. Currently we have 6 outstanding complaints, from 5 from 2020, with 2 District Council and 3 Parish Council related, and 1 from 2021, which is District Council related. They're all pretty much nearing the end of their consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Can we agree to note the update? Is there a mover? Councillor Hancock, and a seconder, Pat Ancliffe. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Well, the motion has been carried. Right, now then, the work programme. Can I invite the Governance Officer to present the committee's work programme for the remainder of the municipal year?
Thank you, Chair. The report just outlines the committee's work programme for the remainder of the municipal year. Excuse me. It's a rolling document and it's subject to change as members see fit. So it's really just for the committee just to note and approve the work programme.
Any questions? Okay. Could we have a mover, please? Pat Ancliffe, and the seconder, David Hancock. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Right, so the motion has been carried. Right, item 12, urgent business. I have no urgent business, but apart from one thing, now then, yes, I mustn't forget this. The meeting on, I think it's the 24th of 21st, Wednesday the 21st of April. I've moved it to 3 o'clock because I'm having my COVID jab just before 2. So if you don't want to be addressed by a bumbling idiot, that's the reason I've moved it. So you still may get a mumbling idiot then, depending how it goes. So if there's nothing else, I declare the meeting closed and thank you all very much for coming along. And don't forget, it's a 3 o'clock start. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.